weariness and a headache. Not a very nice way to start the day.
どうしたの?
Oh, I don't think we've seen this scene either. So that's a pretty interesting background. It looks like a very, very busy kitchen. And then if we change it to a modern art style for the console backgrounds. Right, well, back to the original.
ケイチ、今朝は顔色悪いわよ。昨べは何時に寝たの?
It seemed that my mom had noticed my sullen state. Yesterday, I kept on waking up in the middle of the night. Without a doubt, I felt a presence. I felt the presence of someone standing in front of my door. I told myself repeatedly that it was my imagination and forced myself to try to sleep. Except, not being able to stand it, I gathered up my courage and opened the door. Of course, there wasn't anyone there. I did think this 3 times throughout the night. Or maybe I just don't remember doing it any more than that. Even though I was able to get to the breakfast table without incident, I still didn't feel at ease.
風邪かもしれない。なんだか食欲ないんだ。
あら、ちょっと熱あるんじゃない? どうする? 学校行ける?
Also, hey Mina, thanks for stopping by. This might be a little bit more of a background stream, by the way. I think you've missed quite a few of them, so I don't blame you if you're a little lost. But just know that we're at a point in the story where, after the murder mystery got introduced, and we started talking to a cop about it, a person that was close to us ended up kind of stalking us without us knowing. So just that's kind of what's going on. Also, Shady, thanks so much for the follow. Hope you enjoy your stay, even though again this is more of a visual novel thing. But either way, back to this. Technically, I did go to a school, but it was mostly self-study. It wouldn't matter much if I missed a day, would it? It could have been that I hadn't been feeling well for the last few days because I really did have a cold. If I took some medicine and got a good day of rest, I might be able to greet everyone with a smile tomorrow. Startled, I looked back and forth between the entrance and the clock. It was 10 minutes later than when I usually met up with Rena. It was Rena.
レナちゃん迎えに来ちゃったけど、どうする?
Oh boy.
お休みする?
Rena was a good girl. She might be somewhat quirky, but she was certainly cute. The lunches she made were delicious and she always looked out for me. Why should I be so scared of something like that? It wasn't Rena's fault. It was probably mine. It had to have been my cold. It just had to be.
休む。ごめん。
じゃあ、母さんが断ってきてあげるわね。
Mom headed off to the door. I would have to pass by the entrance to get back to my room. I didn't have the nerve to meet with Rena, so I wrapped myself in a blanket on a sofa and closed my eyes. I was so sleep deprived I quickly fell into a deep slumber. I had only intended to lie down for a bit, but it was almost noon when I woke up. I called out to my parents, but they didn't seem to be around. On the table, I found lunch prepared and a note. Mom and Dad had apparently driven off somewhere far away. It likely had to do with Dad's work. This happened every so often, so it wasn't that unusual. Oh no. They would be back for dinner, but might be a bit late. On the note it said, "The insurance card is in the cabinet. Take it and go to the hospital." There was also a well-drawn map to the hospital. That's right. I hadn't been there before, so I didn't know exactly where it was. I had a light lunch, although it really was just leftovers from the morning, and just in case, went to the hospital. Normally, I'd never be here in the middle of a weekday, just walking around like this. Had me feeling guilty. Oh, sorry, just walking around like this had me feeling guilty. It was an odd feeling. Following my mom's map, I took a road I usually never used. After walking for a bit, the hospital sign came into view. I don't think we've seen this background either, but here's the clinic, right? Or the hospital. And let's check out the console version of it. And this is what it looks like. Which is pretty neat. Again, there's like a charm to the original, like, backgrounds, the original sprites as well. But the backgrounds for, well, the backgrounds and sprites for the characters from the console are also just really, really nice. Either way, Idia Clinic was written Idia Clinic was written rather stylishly on the sign. The clinic wasn't very big, but based on the scale of the rest of Hinamizawa, it was far too grand. There was a parking lot and even a reserved spot for buses. That is kind of grand, considering that, again, we're in a village of, like, in a mountain village of all things, in the 80s, with a population of like 1,000 people. Like, this is kind of huge for, you know, a clinic or something for a town this small. They must be making a mint. Yeah. I spaced out in the air-conditioned waiting room until it was my turn to be seen.
前原さん、診察室へどうぞ。
After half-heartedly answering all of the chatty doctor's questions, he responded with the old, "It's probably a cold." They gave me a shot and 3 days worth of medicine. I thought it was a little overboard, but if it would clear away the gloomy feeling I've been having lately, then it was worth it. I settled the bill and took a quick trip to the washroom. As I was leaving, I overheard a conversation between some elderly people who seemed to be regulars at the clinic. Of course, I had no intention of eavesdropping. If it just wasn't for that word.
やっぱり鬼隠しかいね。
どうかね。まだまだ若い子だけや。駆け落ちかもしられへん。どこの誰とよ。季節のたびに東京もんが来ちょったろ。でっけえカメラ持った若者が。あれと仲が良きゃったって話。知られへんの？
Are they talking about Tomitaka-san? I could feel my ears perking up.
そら知らんけど。でも、普通駆け落ちっても仁義あるだろう。書き置きとか辞表とか書かんかいね。
すったらん書かんから駆け落ち言うんね。わきゃ看護師さんの顔見られんようなるんは寂しいね。
Interesting, because remember, from what we learned last stream, Tomitaka-san again was killed, or he died either. Well, he was beaten to he wasn't beaten to death. He was beaten, and then he clawed at his throat with his own fingers, until he reached his arteries and he choked to death on his own blood. But then the nurse that he was with, whose name I always forget because we've only spoken to her like twice, she went missing. And as we've come to realize, there's been a pattern every single year during the events of the village festival, the Watanagashi, where you will have someone who dies and someone who disappears, someone who's quote-unquote demoned away, right? Normally the phrase is spirited away, but from what we learned as well is that the village that we're in, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a day, and I'm exhausted, but if I remember correctly, our village was known to host ogres who would leave the mountain in the like at night and go after people, you know, below the mountain. So, you know, in the local villages near the mountain, in the middle of the night, to eat, basically. So that's where the term "demoned away" at least came from in this what's it called, in this game. So we've learned that our village, it is not necessarily haunted, but, you know, cursed to some extent, and that someone dies and someone disappears. So what they're talking about here is the whole, you know, leave a note or something before you quit your job. You know, like, hey, I'm getting a low to have to quit. Instead of doing that, because she used to be a nurse, I believe, at this hospital, and she's gone. So Tomitaka-san died, and then this chick got quote-unquote demoned away, which is what everyone in the village seems to think happened. We're not sure what actually happened to her. For all we know, she also died. But as far as we know, she's been demoned away.
高野さんはしっかり者よ。
Yeah, Takano was her last name.
どこへ行ってもやっていけろん。
So her name was Takano-san. That woman with Tomitaka-san. And she worked at this clinic? Oyashiro-sama's shadow was following me everywhere I went. I started listening more closely, but they began talking about fishing. And it didn't seem like they were going to revisit the topic. I gave up and left. And again, Oyashiro is the like patron deity of this village, right? Like the guy that oversees everything. He's the god they make you know, rituals to, and, you know, worship and so on and so forth. Because this happens a lot in Japanese villages. Like, some will have, you know, Amaterasu for all things. For all, you know. Or any other Shinto gods and so on. I don't remember if Oyashiro was an actual god or not, and I don't want to look it up because I might get spoiled. Thus, even though I was separated from the daily monotony of school, I wasn't able to escape from Oyashiro-sama's shadow. But of course, Oyashiro-sama was the guardian deity of this place. Okay, well, he mentioned that again. Of Hinamizawa. As long as I was in Hinamizawa, I wouldn't be able to escape. Which is quite something. Maybe it was because I was walking outside, but my appetite had suddenly returned. I might as well buy a snack with a change from the examination fee on the way home. Contemplating that, I turned on to a familiar street. At that moment, I heard a car horn abruptly honk behind me. Was I really walking so far into the middle of the road where I'd be in a car's way? I moved further off to the side, but the horn was still honking at me. I turned around, peeved.
Maibara-san!
Oh no.
Konnichiwa.
It's Oishi-san. He stepped out of his car, AC on full blast, and waved at me.
今日はどうしたんです？学校はお休みですか？
ちょっと体調悪かったんで、今日は休みました。お昼を買って帰ろうとしてたところです。
そりゃよかった。実は私、お昼に行こうとしてたんですよ。よかったらご一緒にいかがです？
So remember, this is the guy that kind of got us, I don't want to say into trouble, but he's the one that kind of made everyone suspicious of us, in the sense that, well, at least one of our friends, Rena, saw us get into his car in the middle of the school day for no reason. I assume she knows he's a cop, and that we've been questioned. And remember, he's not from this village. We moved into this village. So we're outsiders, and he's, well, a cop who's more than likely going to try to look into the murders, which we've technically not been told about by our friends, but they seem to know that we know. So it's about to... Oh god, it's going to get even scarier now.
ああ、お体に触るようでしたら構いませんよ。
I was just going to lie down after going home anyway. And I didn't really have a cold.
地元の食堂だと嫌でしょう。町まで行きましょう。ちょっと走りますがよろしいですかな？私、おいしいお店知ってるんですよ。
I'd finally begun to understand Oishi-san's roundabout way of saying things. He probably wanted to talk to me about stuff that would be difficult to discuss while in Hinamizawa. Like the murders. I went with Oishi-san riding in his frigid car. It was almost as if the bright sunlight outside was a lie.
昨べは遅くまですみませんでしたね。ご家族に送られませんでしたか？
いえ。
I recalled Rena, who had been listening to the phone conversations all that time, separated from me by just the door. Even now, in the brightness of the sunlight, the thought still creeped me out. With a big bump that jolted the car, the road connecting to the city changed from dirt to pavement. My head swiveled back with a sudden realization. That's right. This was where Tomitake-san died.
富武さんの捜査は暗礁に乗り上げています。
It's like he knew immediately. Oishi-san spoke while peering at me from the corner of his eye.
自分の爪で喉をかき破るという異常さから幻覚作用のある何らかの薬物によるものだと信じているのですが、こういう症状、それも急激に引き起こす薬物はなかなかないらしいんです。もちろん検視解剖もそれを念頭に置いて十分に行ったのですが、手がかりはやはりありませんでした。
漫画なんかによくあるじゃないですか。体内に取り込まれると分解したりして証拠が何も残らないなんて、そんな薬
ありますよ。演歌作詞何でしたっけ。
Succinylcholine something.
まあ、結構あります。でもですね、富武さんのような症状を引き起こす薬物にはそういうものはないそうなんですよ。
じゃあ警察は富武さんはたたりで死んだってそう言うんですか。
I couldn't help but feel that the police were worthless. I just wanted the idea of a curse to be dissociated from Tomitake-san's mysterious death.
悔しいですが今のところはですが死因はともかく死ぬ前に何人かの人間に囲まれて暴行を受けたことだけは間違いありません。たたりでなく人間が事件に関わっているのは疑いようがありませんよ。
That made me a bit relieved. We passed in front of a rather desolate, but still busier than Hinamizawa train station. The car pulled into a restaurant parking lot, and I followed Oishi-san into the shop. It was pretty crowded, but there were only adults at this hour. Of course, there wouldn't be children in here in the middle of the weekday.
2名です。タバコは、我慢します。
I'll make do.
こちらへどうぞ。
Oh, that's right. Back then, well, actually, I think this is still a thing in Japan. Maybe not as much anymore, but at least back then, in the 80s, there were, what is it, like in the 50s? All the way up until, I believe, the 70s, even in the US, for example, or in the West in general, smoking was like the norm in restaurants, where anyone could like smoke at a restaurant. And it wasn't until, I believe, the 80s or 90s where they started having smoking and non-smoking areas. And I believe this applied to other places as well, like cinemas, where you could go to watch a movie and there would be smoking, which is interesting. But I just completely forgot about it because, like, collectively as a society, we've kind of stopped smoking cigarettes, and most individuals now go for vaping, which is still bad. Anyway.
ご注文がお決まりになりましたらお呼びください。
We were led by a peculiarly dressed waitress to our table. I sat with Oishi-san in the booth.
どうです？このお店のウェイトレスさんの格好、可愛らしいと思いません？
My God.
え？
Huh?
まあどうでしょうね。
このお店ね、いっつも大人気なんですよ。お料理よりもウェイトレスさんがね。
ああ、大石さん、目がやらしいですよ。
そうですか？
I've never seen anyone use a laugh like that. So we had seen that background before in one of the past what is it, like clues or sorry, tip sections, but we haven't seen this. So here's just a picture of like a menu. But let's also check out the console version of it. Here. And then it's just a bunch of cakes and parfaits, it seems. Yeah, like mint chocolate, regular chocolate cake, strawberry cake. Actually, that glass looks really interesting. The one in the back. I don't think I've seen a glass like that before, or if I have, it's been ages. But I don't remember. Like just two cylinders like stacked on top of each other. That's probably something that's no longer being used. Anyway, or a style that's no longer being used. Regardless of how the waitresses looked, the food was decent enough. Finishing our meals while talking about some inane topic, Oishi-san's after-meal cup of coffee arrived at the table.
昨日ひなみ沢の昔話が出ましたよね。
ええ。人食い鬼の里だって言われてたって話でしたっけ？
Right. Yeah, so it seems like the game does a pretty good job at reminding you like what kind of has been going on or stuff that's been recently covered, which is very good, and it makes my job a lot easier.
私もあんまり詳しい方じゃないので、うちのばあ様に今朝ちょっと聞いてみたんです。
Oishi-san took out the notepad that was stuffed into his breast pocket.
なんでもですね、大昔はひなみ沢は
Oh my
鬼の
god.
淵って呼ばれてたんだそうです。
Now, do you remember that, once again, the term that they're using is Oni, which at the time was just called, or would just be localized as demon. I believe this happens in Inuyasha as well, where I believe they use the term Oni in Japanese. It's been a while since I've actually fucking read or watched Inuyasha. It's been like years. But do you remember that the term Oni mainly refers to ogre-like creatures? When stuff was being localized to the West, it was translated as like demon, but that's not always the case. And I'm pretty sure here they're referring more to ogres. By that I mean Japanese ogres, which are different. They are like, you know, big bulky, like, you know, dudes possibly in some traditional Japanese attire, or in some loincloth, or in some, you know, sash that's made out of like some animal's pelt, like a boar or a tiger or something. And they just have like giant clubs or any other type of like martial weapon. Right. So try to keep that in the back of your head. But it usually is just called, like they use the catch-all term demon for this. But again, they're more like Japanese ogres. Anyway.
鬼ヶ淵。すごい名前ですね。
今でもその名前残ってるんですよ。神主の妻が受水自殺した沼の名前は今でも鬼ヶ淵というんです。沼の底の底は鬼たちの住む国とつながってると言われてたんだそうです。
Of course, nobody had told me anything about such an ominous swamp. I believe Tomitake-san did, because we know this. Like I'm pretty sure we were told that when we asked about the murders, and then we were told about the suicide into the swamp, and then one of the reasons why they couldn't find her body was because of this superstition. They were able to find some of her belongings, you know, like jewelry or like a necklace that she had or something, like her shirt or something, but they couldn't find, you know, her body at all, and they believe that sank to the bottom into the quote-unquote like realm of demons
でですね、
or ogres
鬼ヶ淵
or
は
underworld, I guess.
恐れられていたと同時に崇められてもいたんだそうです。
A respect born of fear. I guess you could say it was a kind of deification. A village of inhuman creatures.
鬼たちはある種の仙人でもあったらしいんですよ。例えば不治の病にかかった村人を鬼ヶ淵に運んで治してもらったりとかしたんだそうです。
Even if we're calling them demons, Tengu long-nosed goblins or senin would be a more apt description. Or senin. Right. So, I mean, I let them get to it. But yeah. So, if you don't remember, like, Tengu are usually humanoids with like, bird wings either on their back or... I believe they do have arms and hands. And they tend to have a mask or just very, very, very long noses. Or masks with very, very long noses.
鬼って言ってもそんなに悪い人たちじゃないみたいですね。
でもそこはやっぱり人食い鬼らしいんです。ばあ様に聞いた昔話ではですね、息子を治療してもらった代償として連れてきた母親を食わせろとこう
息子を治療してもらった対価が自分ですか？それは怖いな。
もちろん母親は息子を連れて逃げます。これをですね、鬼ヶ淵に住む村人鬼たちがですね、全員で追いかけて取り囲んで捕まえたんだそうです。
The entire village. Apparently. It's quite a frightening thing to imagine. Right?
結局母親も息子も捕まって食べられちゃったんだそうです。おしまい。
その話矛盾がありますよ。
Also, there's another new background. So this is from within just a restaurant in like 2002. Or the year 2000. And then the new background. Oh my god, right, this is dynamic. I forgot. That with the console like backgrounds, or with some of the console stuff, they added like dynamic backgrounds. Oh no, it was just a glitch. But there is dynamic posing for the console art, where sometimes, like if you recall last stream with Rena, how she shifted positions, right, depending on where she was standing. Or sorry, depending on the art style. But yeah, this place is called Angel Mort. What a fucking weird name. All right, but that's the background, or this new background. So let's swap back to the original. Unless this is intentional for... No, I'm pretty sure it's just glitched. Anyway.
当事者の2人が食べられちゃったんですから、その話が残るはずがありません。
Let me do this real quick. There we go.
ありゃ。昔話はこういうの多いですよね。
In contrast to the ghastly tale, Oishi-san laughed heartily while sipping his coffee.
でもですね、他の昔話にも結構あるらしいんですよ。鬼ヶ淵の鬼たちが総出で獲物を捕まえに来るというのは。
I love when they use instruments like these. It just sounds like so mystical, so weird, or... I don't want to say exotic, that's not the right word. But like, yeah, like mystical would probably be a better like word. I recall that Mion said all the villagers united and fought against the dam construction. I saw similarities with how that part about unification overlapped.
鬼たちの獲物は常に一人で、しかも前もって決められているらしいんです。
That's something? And then choose who it was. Jeez. Like through a committee. That caught my attention. Oishi-san had also appeared to be pondering what it meant.
ばあ様が言うにはですね、鬼の狩りの時には絶対に邪魔をしてはいけない。家に閉じこもって布団をかぶってろって言うんです。
つまりどういうことですか？
獲物の人を助けたり、かくまったりしてはいけないんだそうです。鬼の狩りを邪魔しない限り、村人には危害を加えない。そういうルールなんだそうです。
Basically, don't help the victims. Pretend you didn't see the atrocities. In other words...
ルールを破ったらどうなるんです？
さあ、何しろ人食い鬼ですからね。
Many parts of that tale caught my attention. Parts of the story he told me overlap with this theory that the entire village was in on the crime. Even if it wasn't the whole village, it was conceivable that the villagers were hiding under the covers and leaving them to die when there's a group that was on their hunt, wasn't it? I didn't dare to speak it.
じゃあ大石さんはやっぱり村ぐるみもしくは村人数人の犯行だと見てるんですね。
前原さんはどう思います？ああ、すみません。コーヒーのおかわりいいですか？
That's what I wanted to know. It seemed that we were both waiting for the other to say that last part. He waited for the waitress to finish pouring coffee before
去
speaking.
年、サトシ君が失踪した頃から私は不審に感じていたんです。
Right, I'd forgotten about Satoshi. Because remember, we're part of the school's, like, you know, game club. And we were playing some game about, like, a murder mystery that was going on. And while we were putting away the game, like, we dropped some of the cards. And each of the cards had our names on it. Like, all the members of the group were on the playing cards. You know, and it was basically Clue. And one of the names was a new one that we hadn't seen before, and it was for Satoshi. And when we asked Rena, or I don't think we asked Rena, but like, we realized that was a weird name because we hadn't heard of. Oh, actually, yes, we did ask Rena. It was a weird name that we hadn't heard before, and she mentioned something along the lines of like, "Oh, I never got to meet him. He probably transferred before like I got here." And then we learned from Oishi-san that, well, he had to transfer schools, I believe, before like the ritual, or not ritual, before the festival began. So Oishi-san murdered as he watched the milk swirl around in his coffee.
それでサトシさんのお友達、つまり前原さんのお友達グループの皆さんをちょっぴりだけ、本当にちょっぴりだけですよ、調べさせてもらったんです。
If Oishi-san had said this to me before, I would have gotten angry at him for calling my friends into question. But as I was now, I couldn't.
とてもつまらない話になります。前原さんがつまらないと感じたらいつでもおっしゃってください。終わりにしますので。
Oishi-san was wearing the most serious expression that I had ever seen on him, or from him. It was as if he was telling me to prepare myself and listen. There were quite a few things I regretted hearing from Oishi-san, but none of them were as threatening as this. A little voice inside me was screaming like an alarm. Stop, Keiji. This is probably the last one. I took a deep breath and silenced that voice. I would not run from the truth.
お願いします。
That was all I could utter. Oishi-san stared into my eyes silently for a few moments. After he was certain I was ready, he began.
1年目の事件の被害者は現場の監督さんだったんですが、事件の数週間前に園崎美音さんと取っ組み合いをしてるんですよ。何度か。
Right, and Mion being, you know, one of our friends. Oishi-san had said before that Mion had defied the dam project vehemently. Well, it wasn't hard to imagine how she'd be if she got worked up. How she...
2年目の事件で
Fuck.
誘致派の夫婦が事故に遭いましたよね。現場にはお嬢さんも一緒にいたんです。それが北条聡子さんなんです。
え？聡子って聡子？
Oishi-san's look told me that my voice was too loud. Oh god. Sorry, my throat is a little, you know. I realized it as well, and quickly quieted down. So remember, Satoko is our other friend, the young blonde one.
3年目には神主夫婦が亡くなられますよね。そのお嬢さんが古出里香さんです。
I see.
リカちゃんが？
And Rika is another one of her friends.
4年目に亡くなった主婦はもうわかりますね。北条聡子さんの義理のおばです。当時は聡子さんはご両親を事故で失っていましたので預けられていたのです。被害者宅に。
I could tell my lips were getting dry. I didn't even have the wits to keep my mouth from hanging agape. I thought it was nothing but a bizarre incident, one that I could easily distance myself from. But clicking and clacking, it had snuck all the way to my feet.
ちなみに4年目に失踪した北条聡さんは聡子さんの実の兄になります。
ちょっと待ってください。
So Satoshi was Satoku's brother. Huh. It took everything I had to finally say that. I gulped down a glass of water and once again wiped my face with a napkin. Calm down, Keiichi. But Oishi-san was relentless. Instead of waiting for me to finish sorting out my feelings, he started speaking again. The last of the things I shouldn't have heard.
被害者たちはなぜかあなたのお友達グループに全てつながるのです。
And this is also a new face we haven't seen before. But there he is, kind of mad. And there's the console version. And then the manga gamer one. Anyway.
偶然に決まってるじゃないですか。
前原さん、静かに静かに。みんな見てますよ。
Mion. Satogo. Rika-chan. So what if they're connected? You're telling me all of my friends... It couldn't be. It just couldn't be. Oh, Rena's different, isn't she? Rena isn't connected with the victims at all.
竜宮レナさんは去年まで茨城の郊外にお住まいでした。まあ確かにいずれの被害者とも直接の面識はありませんが。
He said it in a roundabout way. Is he saying she's also connected?
実は調べてみたら竜宮さんは引っ越しの少し前に学校で謹慎処分を受けているんですよ。なんでも学校中のガラスを割って回ったんだとか。
What the fuck?
レナが学校中のガラスを割った？
That same spacey Rena had. I couldn't even imagine it.
3日間の謹慎が明けた後も復学しなかったようです。その間に神経科に通院し、自律神経失調症と診断され、何週間かの間、投薬と医師によるカウンセリングを受けています。
Huh? Interesting. Well, I don't remember much about dysautonomia or dysautonomia could be another way to pronounce it. I just remember that like you get brain fog or something with this. So if you want to look it up, you can, and maybe I'll talk about it next stream. I wonder if it was something like a nervous breakdown. Yeah, it could be that. I heard that it happened to people who are really methodical or overly sensitive. Neither of those match Rena's easygoing personality.
でですね、そのカウンセリングをした医師のカルテにレナさんの会話内その中に出てくるんですよ。結構。
何がです？
I pressed forward carelessly. There couldn't be anything more for me to regret.
出てくるんですよ。お社様って単語が。
It felt like someone's stone-cold hand was caressing my back. Why? Why had Rena spoken of Oyashiro-sama before she even came to Hinamizuwa?
お社様っていう幽霊みたいなものがですね、夜な夜な自宅にやってくるっていうんですよ。 枕元に立って自分を見下ろすんだって。
My mind froze. That's quite the image. Like, imagine you're laying in bed, right? Like you normally would. Your back is, to the bed. Your head is, or your face is looking upwards to your ceiling. And then instead of seeing the normal ceiling that you see above you, you see a face that's just looking down directly at you. That's quite like the image. I couldn't process what I was being told.
その後、しばらくしてひなみ沢に引っ越されたんです。ああ、そうそう。レナさんは、よそ者なんかじゃないですよ。
え？
住民票で分かったんですが、竜宮一家は元はひなみ沢の住人です。レナさんがちょうど小学校に上がるときに茨城へ引っ越されたんです。
My mind went completely blank. It was similar to the static you'd see on a blank TV channel. My ears began ringing as I lost all sense of comprehension.
前原さん、大丈夫ですか？もう終わりにしましょうか。
Those words brought me back. I couldn't let it end here.
レナのことは分かりました。じゃあ最後の被害者の富武さんはどうなんですか？誰と接点があるんですか？
Irritated, I let out one final reprisal.
全員ですよ。お忘れですか、前原さん。みんなで楽しくお祭りの晩を過ごしたじゃないですか。何人もの警官が皆さんの楽しそうな様子を見ていますよ。
Now there was nothing I could respond with. I fell silent as my brain turned to mush.
そろそろ出ましょう。ああ、前原さん。お昼の薬は飲みましたか？
I'd completely forgotten about the medicine I had gotten today until Oishi-san said that. I got another glass of water, and we left the shop after I chugged it down. We got in the car and returned to Hinamizawa via the rough road. I don't believe we showed this background off either, before I forget. Yeah, we hadn't seen this one. Also, this car looks a lot older. This does look more like an 80s car than one from the 90s, or 90s, early 2000s, which is what we're in with the classic background. But yeah, like the shifter is, well, I mean, that's very old for a manual transmission. Anyway, back to the original background. I never really paid attention when I was on my bike, but did cars normally shake this much? It was almost as if the road was desperately trying to tell me something. But that big jolt was from the difference in elevation of the road when it changed from cement to dirt. I was certain that I had heard Tomitake-san scream. I sat in silence, just letting myself be shaken by the car.
お家の前まで送りましょう。今日は病気でお休みだったんですよね。長々とお話ししてしまって申し訳ありませんでした。
なんで俺に話すんですか？
I blurted out the question. Really just blurted it out. I didn't expect an answer.
私、一応確認しましたよね。お話やめましょうかって。
じゃなくて、どうして俺に接触してきたんですか？
True. That as well. I understood quite well that Oishi-san was investigating the string of suspicious incidents. But why was he telling me all of this? I knew nothing and I couldn't help. Everything Oishi-san spoke of was news to me. First of all, what could I, having just moved here, possibly know? By chance, if there was a reason for Oishi-san to reach out to me, then it would have to be that I was a part of Mion's circle of friends who looked suspicious to Oishi-san.
私ね、今年で定年なんです。定年したらばあ様の意向で引っ越しちゃう予定なんですよ。だからこそ在職中にこの事件だけははっきりさせておきたかったんです。
で、大石さんは疑ってるんですよね、みんなを。
Oishi-san didn't really give a response. It felt a little late, but I thought it was his way of showing a bit of consideration for my
こ
feelings.
れはこの道30年の勘です。前原さん、危ないのはあなたなんですよ。
I wanted to reply with, "That's absurd," but in my downtrodden state, I couldn't bring myself to say it.
私は今年で定年ですから、来年の綿流しの日にはもういません。だから今年中に決着をつけたいのです。
In other words, he was insinuating that on the next Watanagashi, I might be the victim.
所長からも注意を受けています。一連の事件は個々に解決しているから蒸し返すなというんです。これは一種の圧力です。
圧力って何のですか？
ひなみ沢の誰かです。着きました。この辺でいいですか？
After some time, the car finally reached the path to my house. The clock read 2 p.m. I was surprised so little time had passed since we ate. It was hot outside the car. The chirping of the Higurashi hurt my ears.
今日の話は全て忘れてくださっても結構です。ですが、私は捜査を続けますよ。お社様のたたりは今年で終わらせます。
何かあったら連絡しろってことですか？
いいんですよ。前原さんがどうしても連絡したくなった時だけでいいんです。
I wasn't collected enough to understand Oishi-san's roundabout way of saying it.
ゆっくり休んでください。病気でお休みの時に良くない話ばかりして申し訳ありませんでしたね。
I didn't really give any sort of response.
私はいつでもあなたの味方です。それだけは信じといてくださいよ。それじゃあ、失礼。
The tires crunched over the dirt road as the car made a U-turn and disappeared into a cloud of kicked up dust. It felt like I was watching a boat only throw me a lifesaver in shark-infested waters before disappearing into the distance. That was the first time I thought Oishi-san was being unfair, telling me I was going to be the next victim, and just saying to contact him if something happened. This wasn't a criminal investigation. He was fishing. And I was just the bait dangling off the line. Would the fish be the perpetrator? Or was it really just Oyashiro-sama's curse? Either way, the bait would be swallowed whole.
畜生、俺死にたくないよ。
For some time, I could do nothing but stare at the puddle of water left behind by the AC from the car. I wonder how much time had passed since I laid down. It was getting dark outside. My body was soaked in sweat. It would probably be a good idea to change my sheets. At that moment, the phone downstairs rang. It was probably Mom. Mom was quite the worrywart. Maybe she had called many times, but I just didn't notice it.
もしもし、前原ですけど。
It's Oishi-san being like, Keiichi, get the fuck out of there. You're being hunted right now.
お、生きてた。もしもーし、ミオンだけど。具合はどう？
圭一のお友達ですか？圭一は休んでますけど。変わりましょうか？
あ、お父様で？すみません。
バカでー、引っかかってやがるよ。
After our exchange, we both had a good laugh together. Except I was suspicious of her even as we were laughing. Was everybody really involved in the incidents? The fact that I couldn't say no saddened me.
元気そうで安心したよ。レナもすっごく心配してたよ。さとこはざまあないですわって喜んでたな。リカちゃんは病気でかわいそうですってさ。
チェ、みんなで勝手に大盛り上がりしてたみたいだな。
まあまあ。でさ、ケイちゃん、お見舞いに行っちゃ都合悪いかな。
Oh.
お見舞い？いいよ、そんな。重病人ってわけじゃないんだから。
うちのバッチャが山ほどおはぎを作ってさ、お裾分けに持ってけって言ってんだよ。だから持ってくね。
おいおい、風が移っても知らねえぞ。
おじさんもレナもおバカさんだから大丈夫。
What kind of a sentence is that? You'll catch my cold. Rena and I are both too stupid to catch a cold.
じゃあね。すぐ行くから。
She hung up cheerfully. Rena's coming too. That's what it sounded like. I was still concerned about meeting Rena, but I guess if she was with Mion. Hi Moon. You missed a bit of exposition. But we were basically told that your wife was involved with a possible person that disappeared, and so was everybody else. And after our friend Rena tried stalking us last night to listen in on one of our conversations without us knowing, they are now coming to visit, after us being sick for a whole day. So I heard the doorbell 10 minutes later.
どんな感じ？ちゃんと薬飲んで寝てた？
そりゃもうしっかりとな。
元気そうでよかった。心配してたんだよ。
悪かったな。明日にはもう大丈夫だよ。
Mion showed a complete lack of concern for someone who's recovering, and Rena looked like she was worried about me from the bottom of her heart. It didn't look like there was anything behind those expressions.
ちょっとお邪魔しようかと思ったけど、まだ本調子じゃないみたいだね。
そうか？
It seemed my face appeared a bit sullen.
じゃあこれ、ケイチくん。みーちゃんのおばあちゃんが作ってくれたおはぎだよ。
Rena held out a package wrapped in newspaper. There might be about 5 in here. It was quite hefty.
な、サンキューな。ミオンのばあちゃんによろしく伝えといてくれよ。
その中にね、レナが作ったのも混じってるんだよ。ケイチくんに見つけられるかな。これ、今日の部活を欠席したケイちゃんへの宿題ね。おはぎにアルファベットがついてるから、明日回答すること。
お見舞いなのか部活なのか、どっちかにしろ。
元気。これなら明日は大丈夫そうだね。
この騒ぎで熱がぶり返したらどうしてくれんだよ、まったく。
みーちゃん、あんまり騒いじゃ悪いよ。もう行こう。お家の人にも怒られるよ。
Both of them thought my parents were home. It was because the entranceway was a mess.
そうだね。もう行こっかね。あ、そう、ケイちゃん。
なんだよ。
お昼、何食べた？
Oh. Her eyes changed. Well, let's look at the console version real quick. The sudden question startled me, and I went wide-eyed when I saw Mion. I had never seen her like that. It was a highly unsettling visage. But why? Is she asking me about what I ate for lunch? What she said was so inane that it was almost meaningless. The way she said it, it was almost like she didn't even care at all about what I ate.
表で食べたよ。
She must have suspected that I was with Oishi-san. Anyway, I felt that if I hesitated or tried to change the subject, then they'd read too deep into it. So I tried answering as quickly as possible. Except, contrary to the efforts I had made, there was a pause before they replied.
圭一くん、お昼は外食だったんだね。
The glimmer from Mirena's eyes had changed at some point as well. It was now sharp, as if to make me feel the feigned ignorance behind her words even more. As if she already knew. That's how it looked to me.
どう？美味しかった？
なんでそんなことを聞くんだよ。
Mion was speaking in an unusually low tone, almost as if she knew that I had eaten at the restaurant in town. No, I'm overthinking this. I mean, both of them should have been in school at lunchtime. There was no way they could have known where I was.
渋いおじさまとご一緒だったみたいだけど。誰？
The package with the mochi I was holding slipped out of my hands. I could tell the blood had drained from my face, making me go pale.
へえ、圭一くん、それ誰？ひょっとして、この間の人かな？かな？
I could feel the back of my throat going dry. This was no longer a bluff. They knew everything?
なんでそんなことわかるんだよ。
It took everything I had to finally force those words from my throat. My knees were shaking.
さーてね。おじさんにわからないことはないからね。
Mion sneered knowingly, and her laugh seemed to carry on forever.
で、ケイちゃん、何のお話をしてたの？ずいぶんと熱くなってたみたいだけど。
みんなの話はしてないよ。ミオンともレナとも関係ない。
聞いてもないのにレナたちの名前が出るなんて、なんだか怪しいな。
Rena's unwavering gaze pierced through my eyes and peered further inside me. I dug my own grave. My heart was throbbing so much, it felt like it was going to explode.
ま、何を隠れてやろうとも、おじさんにはすべてお見通しってこと。それだけを忘れないでくれればいいかな。
God, this is like quite the scary situation to be in. Because we're home alone. And, well, two people that we consider to be our friends are here staring at us like this after we had just learned that they had some involvement in some of the disappearances in town. I couldn't even shake my head. It took everything I had to stop my teeth from chattering. She never let her gaze break from mine, even as she tilted her head slightly.
圭一くん、顔色悪いよ。もう横になった方がいいと思うな。
そうだね。私たちはもう帰ろう。
As if nothing had happened, they both giggled at each other and started making their way out. I hadn't moved a muscle since I had dropped the package of mochi. As they left, the door slowly closed behind them. All I could do was stare, as if I couldn't move until the door was completely closed. Just as the door was just about closed, it opened again slightly with a sudden creak, sending my heart racing once again. A single eye peered in through that narrow slit, and Mion's hawkish gaze peered at me once again.
じゃあね、ケイちゃん。
あ、
明日、学校休んじゃ嫌だよ。
Also, I don't believe we've seen this background. I almost forgot. Not to break the tension too much. The door closed. I wasn't able to move a muscle, even after their low laughter died off into the distance, and silence once again enveloped the room. Coming back to my senses, the first thing I did was lock the door. They knew what Oishi-san and I talked about. Why? How? No, that wasn't important. Thinking about it now, all of it could have been overheard from the beginning when Oishi-san met me. Just as Mion said, I couldn't hide anything. Then, what were they trying to tell me? That part was obvious. They were warning me not to say anything unnecessary. What did they deem unnecessary? I only talked with Oishi-san about one thing, and they were warning me that that was unnecessary. What was it that Oishi-san talked to me about? The incidents involving Oyashiro-sama's curse that occurred every year weren't individual cases, but were connected as a whole, as well as the fact that there may be multiple perpetrators hidden within Hinamizawa. No, more precisely, that Mion, Rena, Satoko, and Rika-chan were all suspicious. Is that what they were warning me against?
何バカなこと考えてんだよ、俺。
I hit my own face hard enough that it let out a loud slap. If only that would wake me from this nightmare. But for some reason, it felt like I was punching a blanket. It was almost laughably painless. Calm down, Keiji. When did I become such a pessimist? Calm down. Calm down. Settle down and sort things out. The reason Mion knew I was eating lunch with Oishi-san was probably because someone from Hinamizawa just happened to be there at the time. They must have told Mion that I was there. That made the most sense. Plus, come to think of it, she didn't ask me where I ate lunch, did she? She only asked, was it good? They were just curious since I was together with someone not from Hinamizawa. It's not as if they had any ulterior motives. That's it. That has to be it. Thinking about it that way, it was the same with Rena. I was just being strangely ambiguous about when I met with Oishi-san, and Rena was just correcting me on that. That's when I was bewildered by the changing character from the usual mild-mannered Rena, and was just startled by it. That's the most natural way of thinking about it. I felt like my mind was mixed up like a tangled mess of spaghetti. Deep red marinara sauce would have poured out of my nose and ears if you squeezed my head. Thinking that, I suddenly felt like vomiting. I really didn't want that to happen, so I stopped holding my head. Lately, I had no idea what anyone was saying. Spending time with them was fun. It didn't feel like there was any sort of hidden agenda. I really do think that they are a good bunch of people. When I just moved here and couldn't make heads or tails of everything, they were really kind to me. But Anna was really kind and always looked after me. As long as that strange affliction didn't rear its ugly head, she was really pretty cute. Mion is also a really good person. She didn't care about anyone's age or gender and was optimistic and outgoing. I was never bored when I was with her. And talking of not getting bored, rambunctious Satoko was a good person for that too. She was pretty bratty, but that was just the way she interacted with others. But Ika-chan was the same way. She didn't speak often, but that didn't mean she was always silent. They're my friends. But after hearing of the better untold secrets of Hinamizawa from Oishi-san and Tomitake-san, when I was told about Oyashiro-sama's curse, things started going crazy. Then hearing from Oishi-san that Mion, Rena, Satoko, and Rika-chan were all suspicious. After that, everyone changed. That's right. It all started getting weird after Oishi-san told me all the strange stuff. At the time, I really should have just not listened to those weird stories. I shouldn't even have asked Tomitake-san about the past incidents on the night of the Watanagashi. If I had just gotten that strange sense of curiosity, if I just hadn't gotten that strange sense of curiosity, if I just hadn't. That's right. So that's why they killed Tomitake-san. Why is it censored? That impudent outsider speaking to the likes of me after everybody went out of their way to keep it a secret from me. They'll probably kill Oishi-san as well. For trying to unearth what everybody was warning me was better left buried. Besides that, he was unforgivable for spewing words that made me doubt the others. Of course, a guy like that is going to be killed. Both Tomitake-san and Oishi-san were nothing but outsiders after all. They were entities who couldn't coexist with the people of Hinamizawa. Those guys should just fall to Oyashiro-sama's curse and just die. It wasn't their fault. It was my fault for not being able to hold back my curiosity. It wasn't their fault. 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 I settled into a daze. It was a lethargic feeling, like I had just gotten up, but the ominous chill that haunted me had subsided. I was fine now. I was no longer frightened. I'd completely recovered. I'll go to school tomorrow, right as rain. I'll greet everyone. I'll take part in club activities. It'll definitely be fun. It had to be fun. I was one of them after all.
あ、そうだ。おはぎ食べないと。どれがレナの手作りか当てないといけないんだよな。
I remember the homework the two brought with them when they visited me. But wow, our club did delivery. That was something else. I picked up the package, I dropped on the floor and headed into the living room. It would be nice, I guess, to have some tea with it. To fill my mouth with mochi while drinking tea. Oh, this was quite a delectable situation I was in. Opening up the newspaper wrapping, there were 5 plump red bean paste mochis fit snugly inside. There were letters written from left to right on the newspaper. A, B, C, D, and E. Now then. They said that Rena made one of these. I wonder which one. There wasn't much difference in how they looked. They smelled and appeared about the same. This was a pretty difficult problem. The biggest difference was probably their shape. I wasn't sure what kind of person Mion's grandma was, but Rena had to be different from hers. Or Rena's had to be different. Looking carefully, I could see one of the mochi was made very neatly. So, well, that, just by staring at it, one could tell it stood
こ
out.
の一個がレナのか否かが勝負の分かれ目みたいだな。
Calm down and think even harder. What if this is like a Saw game? Because I believe Mion gave us like a piece of paper or something. And if we read it after like eating the mochi, it's like, hello, Keiji. You probably didn't read this letter before eating the mochi. But I'd like to play a game. One of the mochi is poisoned. And the poison will slowly kill you over the course of a week. And only I have the antidote. Mion had said her grandma made a ton of them and was told to give some out, if I remember correctly. So that meant 4 of these were from that large batch. Then what about Rena? She probably only made 1. She probably spent quite a bit of time on it. Meaning the one that Rena had made was this one, E. For a moment, I thought it may have been a trap Mion laid as she knew I'd pick up on it. But that probably wasn't the case. I wouldn't be so sure if I knew Mion had made it, but since she said that Rena made it, it probably was in the trap.
よし。 お茶も準備 OK。
So, if you were in a situation like this, what would you do? If you had those 5 pieces of mochi, right? They were all labeled. After the interaction that I personally had, or that we had with Rena and with Mion, I would probably, like, split the mochi? Like, cut it in half or, you know, take a piece of it out before actually biting into it. Just in case.
まずはディフェンディングチャンピオンのミオンのばあちゃんからだ。どれ？
Not bad. The smooth bean paste and soft, chewy texture left a little to be desired. The tea I drank afterwards was also accentuated the experience. This was an exquisite piece of work. Now, how about Rena's? The creation was so delicate, one would think it was a high-class Japanese dessert. Since I normally had quite the appetite, I was slightly worried about the size of the portion. But, well, a first bite. This was quite difficult to judge, actually. The ingredients were exactly the same, so there was a little difference in flavor. What was different was how it was shaped at the end, so it had to be expected. So the deciding factor would be presentation and volume. The well-formed and well-shaped champion versus Rena was the challenge. Versus Rena the challenger with a size you just couldn't get enough of. I had only 1 bite of Rena's. I would probably have to wait until after I was done eating to make my decision. Maybe there was something hidden inside that I could that could cause an upset. It seems my prediction was right. My tongue touched something. It didn't feel like something edible, so I reached in with my fingers and grabbed it. What? What was this? Before I could fully comprehend what it was, I threw away the rest of the mochi I was eating as fast as I could. It slammed against the wall, causing the bean jam to splatter. Then, after sticking for a moment, it slid down to the floor. I was dumbstruck by my own actions. What was I doing? Rena had gone out of her way to make it for me. How could I? Dumbstruck, I looked down at the hand that performed such a vile act, and then I remembered what I had taken out of my mouth. At first, I thought it was a hair. Even though it was shorter than Mion's, Rena's hair was still quite long. And it wasn't this short. It was also a bit too hard to be hair. It was thick enough to roll around in my tongue. There was a bit of a metallic sheen on one end. And yes, there was a hole for where a thread goes through, like it was a sewing needle. Yes, that's right. It looked very much like a sewing needle. Exactly like one. The end was pointed as well, quite sharply. It really did look just like a sewing needle. Huh? What did I mean by looked very much like a sewing needle just a bit ago? I couldn't answer. But a voice inside me already knew, and let me know by chattering my molars together. I couldn't stave off the terror welling up inside me. Suddenly, I tasted something metallic and felt a prickling pain at the back of my throat. I stuck my finger in the back of my mouth and felt around to see if I was bleeding. Suddenly, I felt the urge to vomit. The sharp taste of bile irritated the back of my throat. I clasped both hands over my mouth. After writhing in agony, I was somehow able to hold back the nausea. I was finally able to breathe normally again, but this time, my heart was throbbing intensely. Then it finally registered. Exactly what was mixed in with the mochi. Before I could think of the correct word, my hands were already on the move. Splat. I tossed the rest of the mochi against the wall. The geometrical patterns of the scattered bean jam on the wall suddenly invoked a terrible omen in my mind. After looking away, I dashed out to the hall and flew upstairs to my room, where I stayed under my covers until morning. I clutched my own shoulders, howling madly in a mix of fear, anger, sadness, and frustration. This wasn't a threat or a warning or reminder. Nothing as simple as that. What had happened in Hinamizawa? What is happening in Hinamizawa? What would happen? I didn't know the answer to any of those questions. Where did I break a taboo? Regardless, now Rena and Mion and the others, they considered me an enemy. And they thought I should just die. I won't let you kill me. Not for such a pointless reason. I fell into a restless sleep as I was crushed by my negative emotions. It was as if I was being drawn into a billowing, bottomless swamp. So our friends tried to kill us, it seems. Alright, let's read the tips. So we learned about a drug that makes you commit suicide. Well, it was more of we learned of a hallucinogen that leaves no trace or something. So
単刀直入に自殺させる薬ってないんですか？
直接的にはない。
遠回しですね。では間接的にはあるってことですか？
自殺したくなる精神状態を誘発することはできる。ちゅうことだ。
難しい言い方になりましたね。何ですかその自殺したくなる精神状態ってのは。
例えば一般的な心理学見地から言えばじゃが、心理面が内向状態から外向状態に転じるときに最も自殺が多いと言われちょる。
So if they already have a mental illness, it's more likely that they will that they can be influenced to act upon certain tendencies, I suppose. Clinical depression and bipolar disorder are different. Clinical depression indicates a prolonged state of depression, whereas bipolar disorder is characterized by a passive depressed state accompanied by a very active manic state.
内向状態の時は自信を喪失し非常に悲観的だ。だが自殺もせん。自殺をする気力すらないからだ。逆の状態もまた自殺をせん。今度は逆に非常に自信過剰で行動的なので、自らを順風満帆と思う。だから自殺などせんのだ。
なるほどね。どっちの状態でも自殺をしないのに、状態が入れ替わるときに自殺するんですか？
内向状態には自殺願望はあるが、自殺という大仕事を遂げる気力すらもない。だが、外向状態が始まると、徐々に気力が充実し、体の自由が利くようになってくる。
なるほど。つまり自殺する気力が回復するわけですね。
そういうことじゃのう。だからこの時期に変な気を起こさんように処方箋を施すわけじゃな。
では、富武氏はこの心理状態だったんですかね。
一般的に自殺はちゃんとした文化的な手法で行われる。自虐行動とは全く違うぞい。
富武氏の自殺は文化的じゃないですよね。ではやっぱり何かの中毒と考えるのが自然ですか。最初に言った自殺したくなる精神状態を起こす薬ってのを教えてください。
鎮痛薬の一部には心理を内向から外向に過剰転換させる効果があると報告されとる。
あ？
それから催眠作用を持つ薬を異常摂取した場合にも異常行動が報告されとるが、あまり一般的ではないのう。
その2つは検視の報告だと違うみたいですね。他の可能性は？
あとは病気しか考えられん。甲状腺異常を引き起こす病気にしばしばそれに似た症状が報告されとる。だがそれらは概して特徴的な症状が多い。仏は違うの
う。もっと突発的に発生するものはありませんかね。今回のケースと合うような突発性で自殺したくなるようなやつです。
他には。そうじゃな。脳障害によって精神に異常を発生する状態じゃな。これは薬物中毒でも起こるが、脳の外傷や一部の病気なんかでも起こる。
つまり薬によらなくても異常な精神状態に陥る可能性があると。
仏は犯人に囲まれて命に危険が迫っとったんじゃろ。極度の緊張が続いて、それに分泌異常が重なって、さらに打ちどころが悪くて脳に障害が起こり、自虐行動に走った。
もうちょっと省略して言ってくれませんかね。
つまり乱闘中に豆腐の角に頭ぶつけて、それで異常が発生したと言っとるんだ。
じゃあ星には殺意はなかったってことですかね。ちょいと小銭を巻き上げようと思ったら、たまたま殴りどころが悪かったと。
The two plump men laughed hoarsely.
なんてわけはありませんね。
いかにも。薬物の常用にせよ、精神的なものにせよ、仏の身元が鍵を握っとるぞい。そっちはどうなっとるんじゃ。
あら、こんな時間。そろそろ戻らないとクマちゃん怒っちゃいますね。
Oh, there is a Kuma-chan.
おお、頑張れよ。いいお年をの。
いいお年を。
Interesting. So they mentioned quite a few things there. Now, ironically enough, I am not super well versed in what's it called, in antidepressants and or antidepressant medicine. But I know a lot of people who would just like to throw out words that are, say, medicine of that category, as if, you know, like, oh, like everyone knows this, right? But I never bothered to look into it much because I don't think I've ever taken any specifically. But I looked up what barbiturates are, and they're a depressant drug, it seems. And some of the higher dose effects can be an impairment of memory, judgment and coordination, irritability, and paranoid and suicidal ideation. So that's quite something. And then the threat here.
おや？今の皆さんは確か。
Also, this is a new background, which I believe is the police station. I could do this. Like so. Nope. If we change the art styles, it's different. Anyway, so yeah, this appears to be the police station. It's quite interesting. Let's go back to the original BGs. And
議員バッジが2人いたっすね。
じゃあ県議と市議の園崎だ。
面白いっすね。親戚同士で県議と市議やってんすか。
And once again, like the national diet in Japan is not like something that has to do with health. It's a government agency, like a body of government.
これがずるいんですよ。お互いの名前で慈善運動バンバン。片方の選挙中にはもう片方が別に講演会を開いて二重に選挙運動やってんですよ。堂々と。
よくわかんないんすけど、 それって公選法違反じゃないんすか？
慈善運動にならない限り政治活動は無制限ですからね。クマちゃん、そんなんじゃ戦隊本部好きになった時大変ですよ。公選法くらいは勉強してください。
俺、知能犯化は無理っす。バカですから。
There was Prefectural Assembly member Sonosuke and City Councilor Sonosuke. Also, the mayor of Hinamizawa. So they were all influenced by the Sonosuke family. What crap.
お見送りしてんのは副所長とうちの課長っすね。
It came to me. Or it arrived to you. That night, when the department chief invited me along to get some Olden, I thought that was it.
大石さんは友達多いから聞いてるかもしれないけど、聞いてるかな？
いえ、何も。
お母さん、ガモにはんぺん頼みます。所長んとこに議員の怒鳴り込みがあったんだよ。
あれま、そうなんですか。あ、お母さん、私にもう一杯ください。
Prefectural Assembly member Sonosuke and City Councilor Sonosuke were both intimidating. Our snot-nosed career police chief couldn't handle being yelled at by them. They're like Yakuza.
ひなみ沢事件の捜査の仕方で君を指名して陳情してきたよ。
And I'm sure you know, Yakuza are essentially the Japanese mob.
ありゃ、私？はてはて。
とぼけるなよ。例のひなみ沢の過去の事件。蒸し返してるだろ？
私、富武殺しで手一杯でそんな余裕ないですよ。ね。
本当に？本当にそうならいいんだけどさ。
There was a period of silence. While we were silent, we made headway on our food and drink.
いやー、ごちそうになっちゃいました。今月は負けっぱなしだったんで財布つらかったんですよ。
And then once again, a new background of the city. And here it is at night. It's a lot darker compared to, well, the setting sun in the original background.
助かりました。
いや、いいよ。また馬教えてよ。大石さんと同じ馬を買うから。
最近はダメです。馬の声がさっぱりですから。タクシー！
I'm going by train. The department chief is taking a taxi. I have my own car, but it'd be rash to drive it home. Can't blow it right before retirement with a DUI. Even though he could still rattle off, it looked like his legs were already jelly. Pushing him into the cab, I gave the driver the department chief's address.
ではではまた明日。良いお年を。
大石さん。
はいはい。
過去の事件は全部個別に終わってる。縦に並べるのはやめるんだよ。村の連中は半ば本気でタタリを信じてるんだから。
私だってタタリなんか信じちゃいませんよ。
大石さんは来年で退職じゃないですか。退職金でローン返してお母さんと北海道に引っ越すんじゃなかったっけ？
ばあ様がどうしても生まれの北海道に帰りたいって泣くんですよ。最後のご奉公なんです。退職金はまあすすきので楽しむことにしますな。
所長は退職時特別昇給を見直すかもってさ。
A public servant's severance payment is calculated based on their monthly salary when they retire. So a special promotion of two pay grades is given before retirement. This tops up the employee's severance payment. That tends to be how it's done around here. Of course, it's not exactly a commendable custom. Incidentally, the difference that 2 pay grades makes to the payout is quite significant.
さすがインテリの若所長は言い出すことが模範的です。でもまあ、私たちの給料が血税で支払われてることを思えば、まあ、時代の流れですかね。
It certainly wasn't a laughing matter, but I'll laugh through it anyway.
僕も模範的なこととは思わないよ。でもまあ、大石さんはそれだけの退職金をもらってもおかしくない活躍をしてきたからさ。僕としてはぜひもらってほしいんだよ。
もらえるもんならそりゃ欲しいですけどね。
もらえるよ。大石さんが大人なら。
運転手さん、引き止めてすみませんね。お願いします。
I closed the door roughly, interrupting the department chief's conversation a bit rudely. It looked like he still had something to say, but he just smiled wryly and waved. I waved in return. The cab sped up gradually, and soon disappeared among the sea of lights.
参ったな。ローン返済できるかな。
How big was this loan that your severance package can't even cover it? It's quite something. Alright. So let's save real quick. Since we finished chapter 9. Now here's the thing. We can keep going probably for about another hour. The only thing that worries me is stopping a chapter midway, right? So what I might do is we'll still keep going. And we'll push it as far as I can, because I do have to leave, like I said, in about an hour or so. An hour, hour and a half. So hopefully this next chapter isn't outrageously long. But the only problem is that if it gets really, really, really good, that's going to be a problem. But either way, let's continue, and we'll see where this goes. Because things are getting a lot more interesting. Remember, there's only 13 chapters in this first chapter of this arc. And we're about to start chapter 10. The sound of muffled footsteps stopped in front of the door to my room. A moment of silence, as if whomever they belonged to was ascertaining if I was inside. Of all the things I should have been doing, I continued on with my restless slumber. I was very much conscious, but my body hadn't caught up yet. Even with danger bearing down on me from just beyond the door, it was as if I was completely paralyzed and unable to move. Without a doubt, this was sheer terror. Please, just leave. Hey, why isn't my body awake yet? If they came into my room right now, then... I sprung to my feet and threw my covers at my mom, who was opening the door.
何ケイチ、どうしたの？
あ、ごめん、寝ぼけてた。
I thought it was still 1 or 2 a.m., but the morning sun was already streaming through the gap between the curtains. Dude, I hate that feeling. When, you wake up and you still feel like that you've only been asleep for an hour or two. It felt nothing like morning. Yesterday, I must have fallen asleep right after that. Then I should have gotten a full 10 hours of rest. But it didn't feel like that at all. Real. My internal clock was completely screwed up and my sense of balance felt off. I felt feverish enough that it wasn't clear to me that I was still not well.
どうケイチ、体の調子はどう？学校行けそう？
I felt far from well enough. No, I wasn't mentally fit to go. I was still plagued with the terror from yesterday. If I had swallowed that needle, what would have happened? Or what if it had pierced my tongue? There was undoubtedly a murderous intent, but I don't think that's all it was. Mind you, if you swallow a needle, I don't believe you can digest it. I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure you cannot digest it, or if you can, it would take forever. And then what happens is that the needle goes through your small intestine, or through your intestines, while poking holes internally, causing internal bleeding because of how thin and sensitive our organs are, of course, to something made of steel, which is why you don't swallow, well, rocks or needles, I guess, or sharp, pointy things. If they really wanted to kill me, then there were other, more certain ways to do it. They wouldn't resort to such a dubious method as having me swallow a needle. Meaning, I didn't want to believe it, but going that far was just a threat from Rena and Mion. Aren't you glad you didn't die? But next time, we'll use a more assured method. Like that. Something like sending a letter with a razor inside would have been a joke compared to this.
ちゃんと病院は行った？お薬は飲んだの？
まあ一応。
Something about my mom's dubious gaze bothered me. She seemed more concerned about her son missing 2 days of school rather than him being sick. It was definitely mental fatigue, but I wasn't really physically ill.
一度生活のリズムを崩すとなかなか戻らないんだから。
True?
そら、起きて起きて。病は気からって言うのよ。
I'd heard that line many times before. I was given an award in elementary school for having perfect attendance, but it was like I was healthier than everyone. But it wasn't like I was healthier than everyone.
ささ、顔洗ってらっしゃい。ご飯はもうできてるわよ。もうレナちゃんが来るまであんまり時間がないわよ。
Mom's tone meant I couldn't argue about it, so I had to give up on skipping a second day.
そうそう。今の壁にぼたもちを投げつけたのはケイチ？ダメよ、あんなことしちゃ。お父さん、怒ってたわよ。
I didn't feel particularly guilty for doing it, so I didn't have much of a reaction. Also, Mom didn't question me any further about it. She headed back downstairs after she was certain I was getting up. What Mion said as she left yesterday, "I'd hate it if you missed school tomorrow," came back and dwelled in the back of my head. What did she mean by that? I didn't even have to really think about it. She was saying, don't be absent. Taking that a bit further, it was the same as her saying I should just go about living my life as if nothing happened. If I showed any signs of acting unusual, it would probably result in them making their move. If I acted differently, someone like Oishi-san, for example, might end up noticing that something is up. Meaning, if I didn't watch my mouth or did anything differently from the norm, in effect, it would end up communicating something to those who were undesirable. And it seems that's something that the girls didn't intend to forgive. So if I just went along as normal, no harm would come to me. Was that how it was gonna be? All that misery I experienced up until yesterday would almost creepily just fade away. It was an enticing deal. Just by forgetting everything I'd seen or heard these last few days, I'd be able to keep living on like normal.
そんな虫のいい話あるわけ？
I swallowed hard. I once again deliberated on the idea I had just rejected. Mion was probably a good person who had her friends at heart. She was giving me, who had mistakenly broken some rule of theirs, a chance. Was what I did really something so unforgivable? But Mion had given me another chance. She was saying if I just forgot everything and kept living on like I had been, I'd be forgiven.
ケイチ、ご飯冷めちゃうわよ。急いで降りてらっしゃい。早くしないとレナちゃんが来ちゃうわよ。
あ、今行くよ。
I crammed my textbooks into my bag and hastily made my way downstairs. I picked up my somewhat bland breakfast. It seemed that I didn't have much time. It was already past when I usually met up with Rena. Given yesterday's events, she'd probably be here in the next 5 minutes. I needed to be ready to head to school by then. I had to forget everything that had happened the past 2 days. Forget it all and return to my normal life. For this to be normal, I'll have to be where I normally meet up with Rena. Today of all days, the rice was dry and hard to get down. I jumped at the sound and dropped my chopsticks. That chime signaled that Rena had arrived. Mom hurried me along.
ほら、レナちゃん来ちゃったわよ。急いで急いで。
My mother's merry smile and my gloomy face were polar opposites. Honestly, I was reluctant to see Rena, who was waiting there on the other side of the door. The Rena on the other side was the Rena that I knew. I couldn't keep her waiting. I needed to do things as usual.
おはよ
An invigorating greeting filtered in from across the doorway.
う。ケイチくん、遅かったから来てみたけど、今日はどうかなかな。
The manner in which Rena was concerned was without a doubt the Rena that I knew. But that was probably only if I reciprocated. Forget everything from yesterday. Pretend as though nothing had happened. Forget about the gruesome dismemberment. Forget about the mysterious deaths that happened the following years. Forget about the people falling to their death and the terminal illness and suicide, the fatal beatings and the disappearances. Forget it. Forget all of it. Forget that Rena and Mion were scary. Of course, forget it all. Forget about all of it. Forget about the Mocchi too. Forget. Rena once again asked to make sure.
学校、行けそう？
あ、大丈夫だよ。
よかった。じゃあ行こう。みーちゃん待ってるよ。
Rena showed me her usual bright smile. I couldn't find any hint of deceit in her expression. My nervousness dissipated, giving way to relief.
なのにさとこちゃんね、絶対にできるって意地になっちゃって。
As we were walking, Rena talked about a lot of different stuff, more so than usual.
それで？
さとこちゃん不吉祥だから何度やってもできないの。はう、かいかったんだよ。
Everything Rena talked about was just silly nonsense. So I just replied every so often and laughed from time to time. It was a rather laid-back conversation. We passed by one of our neighbors and they called out to us.
あれ？ケイチちゃんにレナちゃん。今日はちょっと遅いんじゃないの？ミオンちゃん、先に行くって言ってたわよ。
ああ、みーちゃん怒ってるかな。早く行こう、ケイチくん。
After greeting our neighbor with a smile, Rena turned back to me and poked her tongue out. Not expecting that, I couldn't help but crack a smile.
あ、ケイチくん笑った。
なんだよ。
Rena stopped and stared at me.
ケイチくん、今朝もなんか元気なかったから、まだ風邪が治らないのかなって思ってたけど、大丈夫みたいだね。だね。
With a grin, she gently poked my cheek. It was a bright, sincere smile. Hey, Keiichi. How can you still doubt Rena after she shows you a smile like that? Maybe I just had a high fever up until today, and I imagined everything that I thought happened because I was bedridden and delirious. I really hoped that was the case. If God would grant me just one wish, there's only one thing I'd wish for. I would want that what had happened in the past few days, more specifically, from the night of the Watanagashi up until last night, I wanted all of that to have never happened. I wondered how many times I'd wished for this these past few days. As long as Rena kept on smiling like this, I think it might just become reality. So I wanted Rena to keep on smiling. Keep on smiling.
で、ケイチくん。昨日のおはぎ、ちゃんと食べてくれた？
That vain wish of mine was instantly shattered. My heart began palpitating. The relaxed morning mood suddenly became frigid. Rena's smile was the same as usual. Her eyes were gentle as usual. Those mochi yesterday, did you eat them all? Of course, she wasn't asking the question at face value. In other words, Rena was asking, did you get the message she was probably trying to convey?
ケイチ君
I was reluctant to give an answer. Rena stopped walking and stared deeply into my eyes. Don't hesitate, Keiichi. Rena was acting the same as always, wasn't she? I needed to respond in my usual way. Naturally, of course. But both my throat and mouth had gone dry, and my lips were stuck together. Hurry and answer, Keiichi. Not that much time had passed. I could still keep the conversation going naturally. I had to say something quickly. Rena playfully mimicked what I said when I finally squeaked something out. Rena's reaction was still normal. It seems that there wasn't as long of a pause as I had thought. Somehow I finally squeaked out the rest.
うまかった。
However, my strained effort neither sullied nor brightened Rena's expression. For a moment I panicked, thinking I had replied incorrectly. But after a few moments, Rena broke into her usual soft smile and giggled with a joyful voice that seemed to echo throughout the morning air. Being strung along by that laugh, I couldn't help but laugh as well.
そうなんだ。で、全部食べたのかな？かな？
My timid smile froze again. Did you make it without swallowing the needle? Was that what she was asking? If I had swallowed it, then I wouldn't be here.
いや、全部は食べきれなかったからさ。まだ残ってるんだよ。
I was scared out of my wits, but that's how I played it.
あれれ？どれがレナが作ったのか当てる宿題はどうなっちゃったのかな？
あの宿題って今日までだったっけ？
うん、今日までなんだよ。みーちゃん怒るよ。きっと罰ゲームだね。
We both laughed at each other again. To a casual observer, it was just a typical morning. If I could just let myself believe, then even I'd think it was just the usual morning routine. But I was certain I wasn't mistaken. There was something unimaginable buried beneath the facade of this giggling Rena. I recalled that unexpected piercing voice that I could hardly believe came from Rena's mouth. The moment that image crossed my mind, I felt a cold sweat trickle down my back. Was it only at that particular time that something evil had possessed Rena? No, that was wrong. That was still Rena. Oishi-san told me, didn't he?
実は調べてみたら、竜宮さんは引っ越しの少し前に学校で謹慎処分を受けているんですよ。なんでも学校中のガラスを割って回ったんだとか。
Rena had a disorder that normal people didn't. No matter how pleasantly she smiled, that fact would not change. But I couldn't even imagine how she looked as she broke all the glass throughout the school. One thing I knew was that it wasn't something spur of the moment. If it was some sudden outburst of anger, then maybe she'd break a pane or two. But she broke all of the windows throughout her school. Just imagine going through your own school, breaking the windows with a bat. Swing full force at each pane of glass, one after another, paying no heed to the flying shards. Your classmates aghast, unable to move from the sudden turn of events. I wonder where she could have found the most windows lined up in a row. Probably the hallway. Walk, wind up. Walk, wind up. Smash. It was difficult for me to connect that horrifying image with Rena smiling at me right now. But I just had to imagine it. Impossible. Because it was unimaginable. That naive way of thinking no longer worked. The unpleasant piercing sound of shattered glass, the crunching noise as Rena treads across the broken shards walking towards me. Rena's classmates going pale as they forget to even breathe. I wonder what they did as Rena came closer, breaking windows along her path. Did they earnestly try to bring her to her senses by saying something? Or did they just jump at her, trying to stop her savagery? Or did they run to the staff room to call for the teachers? Probably none of those. In the face of that blood-curdling sight, of Rena busting window after window, undoubtedly, all they could do was silently clear a path for her. Dumbfounded, just clearing the path for Rena to continue. It would be cruel to blame anyone for looking the other way. No, they weren't simply looking the other way. They knew it was the only way they could protect themselves. If they had done something differently from the rest, they may have suddenly found themselves as Rena's new target. What would Rena have done to whoever attracted her attention? The answer was obvious. She would have undoubtedly acted according to her whims. Meaning, I would be the next window. Rena staring into my eyes, shards of glass crunching and crackling underfoot as she drew closer. I was also drawn into her eyes, paralyzed. Then Rena struck me with a bat over and over again, like I was one of those windows. I crouched down to the floor, desperately protecting my head. Rena didn't care whether it was my head or my back. Zealously, she hit me again and again. What kind of expression was she making as she was doing this over and over again? I peered up to see. Her expression was so indifferent. It was completely unnerving. It's because no matter how many times she struck me, I didn't make as pleasant a sound as the other windows. She struck me continuously, over and over again. The sound that I wanted didn't come out. Our classmates standing around didn't try to stop her. They didn't want to be the next window. Somebody save me. Turning a blind eye unless we're hanging out? But of course, everyone in class scrambled to obtain the highest standardized test scores. They'd gain nothing from saving a cram school tryhard like me. Eventually, there would be a faint sound similar to when you crack open a walnut, and some sort of reddish-black spray would shoot out. Anyway, it wasn't that Rena momentarily lost herself in her anger. After forcing myself to breathe and calming down my heart, I recalled what Oishi-san told me.
でですね、そのカウンセリングをした医師のカルテに、レナさんの会話内容が記載されているんですがね、その中に出てくるんですよ。結構。
何がです？
出てくるんですよ。お社様って単語が。
Following that, Rena was suspended and had regular examinations at the hospital. Then, as Rena was undergoing counseling, she said it over and over again. Oyashiro-sama.
お社様っていう幽霊みたいなものがですね、夜な夜な自宅にやってくるっていうんですよ。枕元に立って自分を見下ろすんだって。
That was only a piece of their conversation, so I still couldn't see the big picture, but it was by no means a happy little conversation. Then what Rena did Was she saying that ghastly incident was a result of her being possessed by Oyashiro-sama? Up until now, I didn't want to believe in Oyashiro-sama's curse. That's why I intended to say that mysterious deaths every year happened because of some sort of conspiracy. Every time I talked with Oishi-san, I was more certain that the deaths were the work of men and not some curse. Except, if it was people perpetrating the incidents, my friends were somehow deeply connected. If I refused to believe that the curse was real, then I would have to believe those who acted the kindest to me were deeply involved in the incidents. Why? How? For what reason? Was it everybody? It was much more painful and troublesome than accepting that it was just Oyashiro-sama's curse. In the aftermath, Rena had admitted to her doctor that it was because she was possessed by Oyashiro-sama. I felt a strange sense of relief from that. So that's how it was. There was a second side to Rena, a dark passenger. She did that because she was possessed by something strange like Oyashiro-sama. It wasn't Rena's fault. Oyashiro-sama was the one to blame. I knew. This was all backwards. Refusing to believe there was a curse, I wanted there to be a human perpetrator. Now that my close friends were the ones under suspicion, I changed my beliefs at my own convenience, saying it was Oyashiro-sama's curse to blame. Which was a better choice? Accepting that Oyashiro-sama's curse exists, or that Rena and the rest of them were deeply involved in the string of mysterious deaths? I didn't want to think about it. If I just didn't think about it, I'd be able to continue the same as always. I wanted to believe that, but that was no longer possible. I had received her message. It was pathetic of me to try to bend the meaning to my own convenience. Regardless of whether my opponents were a human or a curse, I won't let it kill me. As if I could just bend over and give in, for no good reason at all.
圭一君、さっきから変な顔してる。なんでだろう。
Inhaling sharply upon hearing Rena's voice, I came back to my senses. Before I had realized that we were already at the entrance, I also don't think we've seen this background. Or at least I don't remember. Yeah, I don't think we had seen this before. Shaking my head a few times, I exorcised all those terrifying thoughts. No matter how you looked at it, there's no way Rena could have done such terrible things. It was like I was trying to placate myself. As I slid the door open, a blackboard eraser loaded with chalk dropped down on my head the moment I stepped into the classroom. The chalk dust went into my eyes, inducing a brief moment of agony.
ずる休みの圭一さんにはお似合いですことよ。
The gremlin herself.
圭一もレナもおはようございますです。おはよう、さとこちゃんにリカちゃん。
Not quite in the mood for it, I didn't really react to Satoko's trap. Satoko braced herself as I passed by, expecting me to attack her. She seemed a bit disappointed as I simply walked by silently.
何なんですの？張り合いがありませんわ。圭一、まだ本調子じゃないみたいです。だから、今日は加減してあげて、ね。
Suddenly, there was a slap down on my shoulder. It hurt a bit.
よ、ケイちゃん、しっかり休んできた？
It was Mion. My mind was full with the stuff about Rena, but Mion was also a party of interest. Remember, Keiji? That hawkish gaze from yesterday.
ああ、おはよ
なんだ。ずいぶんと覇気のない挨拶じゃん。差し入れのおはぎ、ちゃんと食べてくれなかったの？
I'm like this because I ate them. Those words were itching to be blurted
う。や
out.
っぱ食欲がなくてさ。 いくつかは食べたけど、だいぶ残しちゃったんだ。
あれ、じゃあ宿題は？どれがレナの手作りかってのの回答は？
ケイチくん宿題忘れなんだって。
ありゃー。じゃあ仕方ないね。罰ゲーム。ひひひひひ。
Flashing a lurid smile, Mion returned to her seat. There was nothing from our exchanges that would cause our classmates to suspect anything was amiss. But of course, anyone listening to our conversations up until this morning wouldn't see anything suspicious. That was why it was so frightening. They acted in a way that, regardless of whatever happened to Keiichi Maebara, no one would ever suspect them. That fact had me terrified. Soon the teacher came. After she asked how I felt and took attendance, another dull, ordinary day began. This free study period was a convenient time to consider where I stood. I gently closed my eyes and pondered the ridiculous position I was in right now. First of all, what I shouldn't forget was how dangerous of a situation I was in. I had fallen out of favor with him. After interacting with Oishi-san multiple times, I could see it as I was getting closer to the heart of the matter. The warning yesterday with the Mocchi was a good indicator of that. No, calling it a warning was just my habit of understanding things. It probably had no meaning beyond stunting my progress and buying themselves some time. Until they had a method of completely erasing me. They were just biding their time. Even though they were keeping me under their thumb with threats, it didn't change the fact that I knew too much. The chilling sensation of my desk made me recall Satoshi Hojo, the boy who was using this seat until last year when he disappeared. Was he also similar to me? Did he learn something he shouldn't have and was erased? Damn. I wouldn't let them get rid of me so easily. Never. But were they really trying to kill me? I had these contradictory feelings for a while now. Even though I suspected them, I felt I had to cover for them. Even having witnessed all of their suspicious behavior, a morning like this just made it all seem like another elaborate hoax. No, that's just what I want to believe. Doubting my friends? Covering for them? My life was in danger. Or was it? Actually, I was debating the wrong point. Given my current situation, those points were something that should have been deliberated on a long time ago. But really, Irena and the rest of them, were they actually aiming to kill me? The little voice inside me continued to torment me with these unresolvable trains of thought. God, I can't read today. Are you an idiot, Keiichi? The answer should be obvious. But maybe that sewing needle might have just been an accident, right? How could you screw up and drop a sewing needle into a piece of mochi? The benefit of the doubt can only go so far. Both Rena and Mion had acted and behaved suspiciously, but maybe it was all some sort of misunderstanding. What kind of misunderstanding? It wasn't just suspicious, it was outright ludicrous, right? Rena just corrected me for lying, and Mion only asked me about what I had for lunch. Bro is like delirious as hell, dude. Rena was standing outside my door, eavesdropping for a solid hour. She was probably just waiting for my phone call to end. For a whole hour outside your room? And it is normal to go home afterwards without saying anything? You heard from Oishi-san, didn't you? About what Rena did at her former school? But at the hospital, she said it was Oyashiro-sama's fault. She...
いい加減にしろよ、前原圭一。お前、命を狙われてるって自覚あるのかよ。
I inadvertently blurted those words out. Hearing myself say that so directly left me dumbfounded for a few moments. Afterwards, I had to look around to check if anyone else had heard it. My little soliloquy cut a little too close to the truth. Even though I could feel the murderous intent from Rena and the others, part of me somewhere was still trying to deny that. This late in the game, such hesitation could be fatal. I knew that. But I was just your average student, a man living his normal, ordinary life. Do you think I could suddenly believe that my friends who had been happily laughing together with up until last Sunday now intended to kill me? Right? This time I remember to keep my voice down so only I could hear it. There was only one thing I now understood. I was too soft. I didn't completely understand how dangerous Rena and the rest of them were. No, I wasn't trying to understand. I was too soft for not listening to Oishi-san when he was earnestly showing me the heart of the matter. I didn't listen because I was too busy pretending to be dejected. I didn't comprehend it. I was just running away. I didn't comprehend it, so nobody had any notion to try and kill me. I needed to get rid of such naive thoughts. As I made that resolution, I heard the bell signaling the end of class. So soon, the day was already over. I didn't recall eating lunch or doing anything in class. My friends were putting their desks together in preparation for club activities. Not long ago, I would have probably happily jumped into that circle.
あらあら、ケイチさん。帰り支度とはあんまりですことよ。
The way Satoko spoke was so typical and familiar, it almost physically hurt.
あれケイチくん、今日は都合悪いのかな今日こそ二人で大勝利。はあ。
Seeing Rena's expression, which said she was really looking forward to today, was hard to take. Hey, Keiichi, maybe Oishi-san is just some enormous jerk trying to separate me from the others by lying to me? Trying to expunge such weak-minded thinking, I slapped myself in the face.
Keiichi-kun?
Yeah. Was Rena really trying to kill me? I wish someone would tell me it was a hoax. I didn't care if it actually was one or not. I just wanted someone to say it was. Ugh. Yet another weak-willed thought. How did I ever become this naive?
大丈夫？頭痛いの？
Apparently, that was when my inner dilemma appeared to Rena.
顔色悪いよ。一人で帰れる？送ってった方がいいかな？
いや、いい。ごめん。一人で帰れる。部活はみんなでやってくれよ。
Upon hearing that I wasn't going to participate in the club meeting, Mion pouted unhappily.
ケイちゃんがリベンジ熱望してたってんで、今日はせっかくこの間の推理ゲームにしたってのにな。
ケイチさんにはリターンマッチに臨む熱いハートはありませんですの？情けないですわね。
I wouldn't fall for some dumb taunt. Without even a real retort, I just grabbed my bag and was about to get up. Someone's hand perched itself gently on my head.
ケイチ、具合悪そうです。かわいそうですよ。
It was Rika-chan. She was stretched up as far as she could, doing her best to pat my head with her petite hand. It felt so nice, which made things even harder.
ごめんな、みんな。じゃあ。
That's all I said as I quickly left the classroom. They said something to me as I was leaving, but I couldn't make it out. I managed to make it all the way to the entrance in that state of mind, took out my shoes, put them on, and went forward. Forward. Harden that heart, Keiichi. They were, for some unfathomable reason, trying to kill me. They were plotting something dubious, watching my every move. But I couldn't hate them, because weren't they my friends? Part of me lamented my naivete, while another part lamented the fact that I had lost something important by lamenting over it in the first place. It felt like my personality was being ripped in two, along with my body. If this is what Yashiro-sama's curse was like, then it was just too harsh. Hey, Yashiro-sama, I was wrong for not believing in your curse. But I believed in it now. Completely. Your curse does exist. So seriously. Just give me a break. I beg you. Come on. Dinner was unusually bland. It had no flavor or aroma. The miso soup that normally tantalized my appetite instead tasted like nothing but boiled water. Dad was eating with us that night. It was a rare occurrence in this household. When he got into his work, he ate and slept on his own schedule. My dad never cared about the time. Since my dad was at the dinner table, it either meant he had just reached a good point to take a break, or he was in a slump.
とにかく作家のモチベーションってものを理解してないんだよ、彼は。
タイアップの話だって口約束なんでしょ？そんなに反りが合わないならきっぱりお断りしたら？
助け合いの世界だからお互い様だとは思うんだけど、これじゃ仕事にな。
I wasn't able to pick out much of my mom and dad's conversation, but I could tell it wasn't a very pleasant topic. That, of course, made the disgusting food even less appealing. Staring listlessly at the exchange between my parents, my mind wandered off to the same thought process I had going all day long. Friends close to me? No. They used to be friends, but I could no longer trust them. Right now, I was greatly lacking in allies. People I trusted, people I could depend on when push came to shove. They were something I just didn't have. Having just one ally would have been incredibly reassuring in the currently hopeless situation I was in. I put down my chopsticks and looked over at my parents, who were still talking about work. The first course of action that came to mind was to tell my parents everything. Currently, there wasn't a single person from Hinamizawa I could trust 100%. That meant the only people I could trust were my parents. But if I told them everything that happened up until now, would they understand? Rena, for example, that neighborly Rena who was so diligent in looking after me, came to get me every day, and sometimes brought over a share of what she made. How could I explain that she wanted to kill me? No matter how I explained, it would probably be difficult for anybody to comprehend. My somewhat eccentric dad wouldn't understand, and my high-strung mom would probably drag me off to a psychiatrist in the blink of an eye. Sadly, that was the amount of trust that existed in our relationship. Even if they did come to understand, could they possibly do? Unless they could uncover the truth, they wouldn't be able to protect me. No. By informing them of these unnecessary things, I'd be putting my parents in danger as well. Considering that the victims in the past incidents were often married couples, I couldn't even joke about it. For the entire Mayabara family to have an accident or to just vanish into thin air, it was easily possible in Hinamizawa. What was important here was that knowing something unnecessary puts you in danger. The most unsettling question was, how did they know that I knew? As long as they didn't know, my parents might not fall victim. That was one way to think about it, I guess. At least, it was like that in my case. After I found out, things started becoming odd. In other words, it meant the following. As long as my parents didn't know anything, nothing bad would happen to them. Which means that this house would be a safe haven as long as my parents were in. I knew these were just assumptions based on conjecture on top of conjecture. Wanting this house to be a safe haven, that was the pinnacle of my weak-willed method of thinking. I had to concede that it was completely safe. I had to concede that it was not completely safe. It was only safer than the outside. I knew that I couldn't rely on my parents. No, I couldn't risk getting my parents involved. That the only person who could be my ally would be Oishi-san. Him and him alone. He was the only person who understood the situation I was in. He didn't care so much about my safety, but he was without a doubt passionate about solving this case. It was a bit frustrating. Oishi-san was basically the whole reason I was in this mess. Now to get out of it, I had to rely on him. Meaning, it was all going according to his devices. It was just my job to look appetizing while bobbing in the waves as bait. Then, when the fish started gathering around, Oishi-san would pull up the big haul. It was slightly infuriating, but even when I thought that was the best course of action. So then, what should I do? Patience was the first rule of fishing. True? Real? Well, reeling comes afterwards, but just keep waiting until the fish actually bites. But I wasn't simply bait. There were lots of ways for me to struggle before being devoured. When they struck, I needed to somehow dodge just enough and tag out to Oishi-san. No question. It was going to be hard. The timing to bring Oishi-san in would be difficult. He was in the city, not Hinamizawa. So if I found him in my moment of need, it would take him about 30 minutes to reach me. So I needed to run away for those 30 minutes. For example, if I set up a rendezvous point for dire situations or something, I just have to hide out there until Oishi-san arrived.
よし、少し見えてきたぞ。
I was still being chased around in the dark by boogeymen, but now I knew which way to go. I would never have imagined this would be so reassuring. Oh yeah, it would probably be best if I had a concealed weapon for when things got rough. Typically, that would call for a switchblade, but that wasn't too reassuring for combat. Also, since it was recognized as a weapon by the public, that also wasn't good. Really, when the time comes, a long weapon like a bat would work in my favor. I remember there was a metal bat at school. I could be confident with that when push came to shove. If I pretended I was practicing my swing, then it wouldn't be suspicious for me to always carry it around. I could go to school early tomorrow and secure it. Just possessing a weapon may be enough to deter them. Also, one more thing. Insurance. If it could be something like a note or a memo, I could write down everything that's happened as a sort of journal. In case I suddenly vanish, the journal would be left behind. With my journal in his possession, Oishi-san should be able to avenge my death. I left my parents engrossed in their conversation about work and went back to my room. I tore out a piece of paper from a notebook and made my way to my desk. Last time I wrote a journal was for summer homework in elementary school. Yeah, I can't think of like the last time I wrote in one. Like ages ago, probably. Like years and years ago. In the off chance something bad happened, the police could use my diary as a lead. So I should only write down the facts. How should I start? I jotted down my thoughts as they came. I, Keiichi Maebara, am in fear for my own life. It made me laugh nervously. It was a line that showed up often in detective stories. I never even dreamed that I would be in the type of situation where I'd write it myself. I do not know why they were after my life. Rena and the others were suspicious, but I had no proof. And that's why I couldn't write anything more. I laughed wryly at myself for writing such a passage draped in mystery. Would the police be able to get the hint from reading this enigmatic passage? I could only pray that they would. What I prayed for the most, though, was that this journal was never needed to play its part. Here I laughed nervously. It was too simple, so I wrote down one more line I had just thought of. The only thing I do know is that it has to do with Oyashiro-sama's curse. Was that too much? I probably shouldn't write more than that. If I wrote any more, then it would seem like I was just delusional. In order to appear to the reader that the person who had written this was of sound mind, I chose not to write anything else at that point. I just needed to add more as I learned more about the truth. I folded the paper and thought about a place to hide it. By hiding it somewhere obvious, there was a chance that they would uncover it instead. On the other hand, if it was in a too obscure of a location, then there was a risk of nobody finding it at all. In the end, I decided to take the clock off my wall and stick my folded note on the back of it with scotch tape. After that, I put the clock back in its normal position. Yeah. It didn't look like anything was hidden behind it. Now I needed to set it up that if anything happens to me, my parents could find it. I looked at it from countless different angles until I was satisfied and made my way downstairs. My parents were still talking about work, and it didn't look like it was going to end anytime soon, so I cut in.
話中ごめん。ちょっと聞いてもらっていいかな。
I never started off a conversation like that before, so my parents were both startled. They stopped talking and turned towards me.
どうしたのケイチ？
お願いがあるんだけど、聞いてほしいんだ。もしもだよ。
圭一、急ぎの話じゃなきゃ後にしなさい。お父さんとお母さんはちょっと今、急ぎの話をしてるんだ。
I didn't think their talk was more urgent than mine. In any case, I stated my request.
もしもだよ。俺が死んだらさ。
Both my parents' eyes went wide as saucers.
死んだらさ、俺の部屋にある時計、あれを棺に入れてほしいんだ。
If they did that, then they'd probably find it. My memoir. Both my parents remained wide-eyed, not moving an inch. I couldn't blame
あの
them.
時計、工作の授業で作ったお気に入りなんだ。頼むよ。
どうしたのケイチ？何かあったの？
Mom was finally able to ask me with a questioning gaze. Of course, this was a normal response for when someone's son suddenly talked about a subject like this. I felt bad about making them worry, but right now, I just wanted them to think about the clock in my room. With the awkward mood leaving the room in silence, I decided to go back up to my room.
俺さ、明日は早くに学校に行きたいから、もう寝るよ。おやすみ。
Saying only that, I left the living room. I needed to get to school early tomorrow and secure that bat. I should make today the last day I went to school with Rena. As I climbed the stairs, I heard my mom call my name, but I pretended not to hear her. It wasn't something I could talk about with my parents. If I talked about it, it would only make things more dangerous. The fight that had begun was mine and mine alone. I couldn't rely on anybody. I wouldn't be killed. Not when I still knew nothing. Oh. Well, this chapter was actually pretty short. Alright, well, let's view the new tip, and then we'll save, and then probably call it here for tonight. So, not feeling so hot.
最近、圭一くんの元気がないね。機嫌が悪いのかな？
さーて、どうしたんだろうね。恋の病にでもかかってるんじゃないの？
Oh my god.
みーちゃん、それ飛躍しすぎ。どう思う？
さあね。ケイちゃんひょっとして、かな？
わかんない。
あの日、ケイちゃんと車で話してたの。中年のでっぷりした男だったんでしょ？
うん。間違いない。
大石のやつ、ケイちゃんに何を吹き込んでるのかな？
真剣そうだったよ。圭一くんは顔面蒼白だった。
あのね、レナはよく知らないだろうけど、実はあいつ、お社様の使いなんだよ。
え？何の話？
あいつが現れるとね、必ず鬼隠しが起こるの。本当だよ。
あれ？
おととし、リカちゃんのお母さんが受水したでしょ？その直前に大石が尋問してたんだよ。
そういえば、サトシくんが転校する前にもいたね。
転校？レナはいいやつだよな。
して今度は圭一くんの前に現れたんだ。じゃあ圭一くんも鬼隠しになっちゃう？
An empty silence hung in the air. And then it was suddenly interrupted. By loud laughter. Well, that's quite something. Let's go ahead and save real quick.